Hi, it's Gary. Welcome to today's video. Today I've got a fountain pen focus for you. We're going to focus on this, the PenBBS 487. It's in the corduroy pattern. It's a pen I've had now for a couple of years. I really enjoy using it. So join me now down on the mat. We'll take a look at the pen, do some size comparisons, a writing sample, then I'll give you my thoughts and a score for this pen. Welcome down to the mat. Here we've got the PenBBS 487 in corduroy. Take a look around the body. Start at the top here. So the silver coloured disc, that's actually a magnet. But on there, following through from the rest of the pattern, which we'll see in a second, we've got the stripes. I believe them stripes are actually in the plastic because that magnet is encased in that plastic top. We come down, there's a teeniest bit of a flare out till we come to the clip band here. So there we go, that's going all the way around, that silver type colour. You can feel the teeniest bit of a seam there. Clip, very springy, nice and springy to use. The cap, same width all the way down. So we get to the bottom, and then at the bottom it seems to have a bit of a taper down to the pen body. The pen body, again, same width going all the way down. Virtually it's just a tube. Till we come to where we can see inside this rather wide silver disc. And this is what the cap latches onto to work the filler. This is a magnetic filler. After that bit of metal, we then finish off. And at the bottom here, one of the things I'm not happy with, there was in there a disc. That came out, we lost it. I've got no idea where it went. So we've just filled that in with some glue. Really basic looking pen. The pattern, as I say, is called corduroy. So if I turn this around, it's predominantly clear, but then we've got hints of blues, browns, whites and greys. It's a demonstrator pen, so we can see that it's got ink there in the barrel. The cap, that comes off in half, one, about 1.5 turns, maybe just shortly less of 1.5 turns. That reveals this number 6 nib. Nice number 6 size nib. I haven't tried swapping it because I quite enjoy the nib that's in here, but that is an option that you can use. The nib, fairly plain, all one colour. Again, this is quite a personal preference. I like the two-tone nibs. I think it just adds a bit of interest. And then we've got some engraving on there. We've got PenBBS. And then we've got what looks like a logo. Quite a pretty looking nib, even if it is just one colour. Into the section. The section slightly concave. So we've got a flare out at the bottom. It comes in and then flares out up towards these threads, which is where the cap connects. Whilst the cap is off, this pen, as I've already said, it's a magnetic filler. It works by taking the magnet that's in the cap and then that attaches at only one place on this metal band. Then the idea is you slowly draw the cap down and that draws this metal band down with it. Dip it in the ink and then slowly push it back up, which again pulls this metal band up, and that causes the vacuum which pulls the ink in. Brilliant idea. And when I saw this, that's, to be honest, why I bought it. I thought, wow, that's unusual, isn't it, Gary? Except it doesn't work. The first time I got it, it went down really well. The second time I tried to fill it, I could not get that to budge for love nor money. And after about 3 weeks of trying to get it moving, I was prodding it with other stuff. I tried stronger magnets, would not move at all. So now all I do when I want to fill this, it's as simple as I pull the nib out and I syringe fill it. I know it's cheating, but it's the only way I've found to actually fill it. Let's just pop the cap back on. There we go. Let's fetch in some pens for a size comparison. So the first two pens I brought in, These are my standard pens, so it's a Pilot Metropolitan and a Lamy Safari. The PenBBS, when it's got its cap on, slightly longer than the Safari and noticeably longer than the Metropolitan. Let's take the caps off these. Here we are uncapped. Little slight aside, as I was taking the caps off this, I accidentally dropped the 487's cap on the floor. I spent about 2 minutes searching for it, could not find it anywhere. Because of the magnet, it had attached itself to the foot of my chair. You know, I was looking under the desk, it was actually on the chair. So that's something I've just learned. Anyway, unposted, I've got to be honest, the Safari and the PenBBS, they look about the same size. The Metropolitan, ever so slightly shorter. When we look at this, the sections on the Metropolitan and the PenBBS, they seem to be about the same width. So that's something which I actually found unusual. I find the Metropolitan fairly narrow to hold, but for some reason the PenBBS, I don't have that problem. It actually feels quite nice when I'm holding it. Maybe to do with that slight concaveness though, that's in there in the section. Might just be what's tricking my mind. Let's post these. With the pens posted, the Metropolitan definitely a lot shorter now, isn't it? Safari, that's in the middle. PenBBS comes out a lot longer. I personally don't like the way the PenBBS pen posts. It only posts down to the top of this metal band. And yes, it seems fairly secure, but a bit of shaking, couple of bangs, and that was off. So not certain that this is a pen I would recommend posting, but as long as you're aware of the limitation, you might get away with it. Let's swap these pens out, and I'm going to fetch some pens in that are in roughly the same price range. The two pens I've just brought in, I've brought in the Moonman M800. That cost me 52 Australian dollars. The PenBBS 487, that was 54 Australian dollars. And the small pen, the baby here, that's the Sailor 1911 Compass, or Sailor 1911 Junior. That was 55 Australian dollars. The Sailor, that's a steel nib. So as we can see, you know, we've got some nice sized nibs here on the Moonman and the PenBBS. You've got that standard Sailor size nib there on the 1911 Compass. That Compass looks a baby compared to the other two. And then the Moonman, just slightly shorter than what I'm seeing with the PenBBS. Let's look at these unposted. Unposted, the Moonman and the PenBBS 487, roughly the same length. But again, I'm just going to point out the sections. The sections on the PenBBS 487 does look narrower, but the shape on this M800, I love that shape. I know it's copied from Leonardo, but I find that's one of the most comfortable sections that I use. Let's just pop the caps on. So here we are with the caps on. Again, the Moonman M800 and the PenBBS 487, roughly the same length. The Compass, still shorter, not as short as it was earlier, but still noticeably smaller. One thing I'm going to make a comment on here, and I know you didn't see it, but every time I go to put the cap on this, I don't know why, I always try to put it on the wrong way around. I think maybe there's just something in there, maybe with the extra weight is what's making me think that should be what goes on the end. So I just thought that's a nice little aside, which I thought I'd share with you. Time to get these out of the way, and we'll do some measurements and weights. So here we have the rule of measuring. Let's fetch in the pen first with the cap on. So that comes in at 14.1 centimetres. Unposted, that comes in at 12.8 centimetres. Posted, that comes in at 17 centimetres. Then if we look at the body and the cap at the widths, being careful not to get the magnet to trigger, the width of the body, that's 1.32 centimetres. The width of the section goes from 0.97 centimetres up to 1.16 centimetres. Remember, it's concave, so that smallest figure is roughly in the centre of the section. The cap, keeping it away from the body, the cap comes in with a width of 1.44 centimetres. Let's get this out of the way and fetch in the scales of weighing. So here we've got the scales, the whole unit, 24 grams. The pen with ink in, remember, 13 grams. And then the cap alone, 13 grams. And I think a lot of that weight, it comes from that magnet. Let's just move this out of the way and fetch in the notepad of testing. Here we've got the notepad of testing. This is an A4 notebook made by Ayush. It's 100 GSM paper. Really nice. I find this works really well with my fountain pens. Let's get on and do some writing. So we've got here a PenBBS 487. It's got a fine nib. For all that it's a fine nib, this is very smooth. The cost was 54 Australian dollars. The ink is by Diamine and it's Oxford Blue. Now, I will be honest, to my eye, this looks like a very, very dark blue, nearly black. I think why it looks like that, this ink has been in this pen for quite a while. Ink in here just lasts and lasts and lasts. And as a result, I think what's happened is I think some of the water in it has evaporated, which has darkened the colour. Let's look at drying times. So we go immediate. 10 seconds. 30 seconds. 1 minute. Smudging ever so slightly after a minute. I'm going to move the mic down to the paper to write a sentence. That's nice to write with. This paper, it has got a grain to it. So that's a lot of the reason why there's a lot of noise coming when I'm writing. The nib itself feels very smooth. I've tried it on Tomoe River paper and there's very little feedback. And for me, that's again ever so slightly a negative because I do like that little bit of tactileness. But on this paper, it feels really nice with the way that it's interacting with that grain in the paper. Let's see if there's any line variation. So this is with no pressure. This is with some added pressure. The nib, it's very stiff. I think the reason why it looks like it's a wider line is because of the pressure that's letting more ink out. I'll do my S's. You know, it seems a very consistent line regardless of direction. Final test. The ink keeps really well. When we're looking at the scribble that I did for my final flow test, you can see there's a lot more of that blue coming out. Whereas in the writing, I say to my eye, there looks like more black in there than blue. You know, if we look at the L and the Q, on the Q, the circular part looks blue, but then the down looks almost black. The N looks nearly black, whereas the E next to the N has more blue to it. So it's getting quite a nice combination of colours. So in one respect, I'm glad that I left it as long as I did because I'm quite liking seeing this. I think it looks really different. Now, in the past, I've had Colourverse Supernova in this pen, which is a brighter blue. And I've got to be honest, that's my favourite colour combination in this pen, is that Supernova. The reason why I'm trying this Diamine Oxford Blue is Colourverse ink, very expensive. So I can't really justify buying a bottle of it. The times I've had it in here, it's been from samples. So I'm trying to find a different blue. This one to me isn't quite right, but I've got something like Diamine Acid Blue, which is what I may try in this eventually, just to see if that makes a difference. So anyway, it's on to scoring time. This is the part I always enjoy. So we'll start with pen looks. It's a demonstrator pen. It's got that going for it. It's got this pattern on there. But to be honest, the pen looks cheap. it doesn't look like it's a quality writing tool. Now yes, $54, you expect to see something nice. Maybe not perfect, but certainly I expect to see something a bit nicer than this. You know, it's not bad looking, just not grabs you and smacks you around the face and says, look at me. For pen looks, I can only give this a 7 out of 10. Writing experience. Well, as we saw here, writes really nice. It's consistent, no skipping, no hard starts. I've already said I've had this inked up for a while. I could leave this pen 3 months, pick it up and it will write straight away. Very predictable. Get a nice consistent line. I'm actually, as I've already said, I'm liking the variation here with this colour. Very smooth nib. On here where I've got that texture, where I've got that grain, feels quite nice. On something like Tomoe River, I don't actually enjoy it. It's just got no tactileness to it. It's not bad, but for my personal preference, it's just not where I would like it. For writing experience, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Ink flow, again, we've seen here, we've got no issues with ink flow. It keeps up. I've already said, no issues with hard starts, no issues with skipping. It can be left for weeks. Nice big capacity, goes and goes. I've found even when being used regularly, I can get about 3 months of one fill. So for ink flow, 8 out of 10. Value for money, difficult one. The pen does what it's meant to. It lets me get ideas out of my head and onto paper. And I do quite enjoy doing it, so it meets that criteria as well. I'm very severely disappointed by this filling mechanism. That's the only reason I bought the pen, is for this magnetic filler, because I wanted to experiment with it. Hasn't been successful. Really lets it down. It's a good job. It's easy to get that nib out so I can fill it with a syringe. It writes consistently. It looks a bit disappointing, but it still looks okay. But as I've already said, it does what it should. Lets me get the ideas out of my head and onto paper. The one thing I will say with this, and it's unusual for a lot of my pens, I wouldn't buy another. Really disappointed, and it all comes down to that filling mechanism. That's what disappoints me. So I'm going to give this, for value for money, I still think it's reasonable, so I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10, which means the total score for the PenBBS 487 with Diamine Oxford Blue is 7.75 out of 10. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Have you got a PenBBS 487? Have you had any issues with that magnetic filling system? To me, it's the only thing that lets that pen down. Please drop a comment down below. Let's kickstart the conversation. Please hit the thumbs up button every time you like, every time you comment. Just helps with the YouTube algorithm. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel so that you can get new videos as I release them. I'll talk to you again soon.